My name is Paula Forbes, and I'm welcoming you to the 2019 Student Conference. Woohoo! I just want to tell you, a couple of years ago, we were working on a project called Reimagine Minnesota. That project had to do with looking at equity, excellence, and equity and equal education. We wanted to make sure that all kids got everything they deserved in their educational system. And so I worked with over 40 superintendents around the Twin Cities, and we had community conversations. And out of those community conversations, we came up with a collective action plan. One of the strategies in that collective action plan was student voice. We promised that we needed student voice. And so a couple of years ago, I was sitting with my co-host, Dario. How many of y'all know Dario? Woohoo! Dario from Youth Lens 360. And I said, you know, I really dream that we're going to be able to bring student voice. We need to hear from thousands of students. We want to make sure we know what they want. We said that if it's student voice, then we'll know their choice, right? And so I just want to tell you, dreams do come true. Because you're here. You're here. Woo! You're here. We have a really special guest. This could not be possible without the support of the Minneapolis Foundation. When we kind of put the word out about Reimagine Minnesota, your former mayor of Minneapolis and the current CEO of the Minneapolis Foundation stepped forward. He has had a passion for years around equity in education for students, not only in Minneapolis, but for the state of Minnesota. And he has been a champion of that. He works courageously every day to make sure you have the best education possible. And so he stepped forward and said, Minneapolis Foundation's got your back. We're going to help you host these students. So I want to make sure that you give a great round of applause to T Rybak, former mayor of Minneapolis and CEO. Let's bring him on.
Thank you so much, Paula. Actually, this wasn't my work. It's Patrice Relaford, she's my partner at the Minneapolis Foundation. She's making me speak.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah. So you've had a phenomenal band. None Above is fantastic. You were entertained, but now is the point where we're going to ask you to be the whole program. And you're going to be asked a lot of questions now. And I'm going to start with one that I think is a pretty important one. I want to see a show of hands of anybody in this room who at any time in their entire school career has sat in a classroom and thought, I don't think I'm learning. Okay? Put it down. How many of you have ever sat in a classroom and looked across the room and saw a friend of yours or maybe somebody you'd never talked to, and saw a look on their face and you recognized something was wrong, but you didn't know what to do about it? You ever had that feeling in a classroom? I've had it a lot. Have you ever sat in a classroom and watched a teacher work with people in that classroom and thought, wow, they are so good at this. I wish every single teacher was as good as this one who's breaking. Have you ever had that experience? Well, begin to ask yourself all of these questions and say, I wonder when is the time when someone will finally ask me what we should do with the schools. Today is that day. That's the point behind all of this. And one of the things that I think is extremely important about this is when we think about the voice of a student in education, there is no way to reinvent schools if we don't listen to you. But you're not the only ones running this place, right? There are also superintendents and teachers and all sorts of families, and a lot of people buy into this. You can do an enormous amount with student voice, but you can't do it alone. So that's what this is about. A group of superintendents came together and said, we're in charge of these schools. If somebody asked us what we would do to fix it, here's what we would do. But before the superintendents did anything, they turned to a smaller group of you in this room. And then we took that work And we said, let's bring it to the smartest people at the University of Minnesota doing all this research on what works. So then they added onto it. Now we're bringing that back to you and having your voice come back into it. Then next month, we're going to bring together a really large group to do that, and we're going to keep having people talking to each other, because your voice is powerful, but your voice only speaking to each other can only get so far. And in this context, the thing you got to remember is you are the most valuable generation we have ever raised. We have never raised a generation more valuable. Now, I'm a washed-up politician, and you may think that's just me saying something that a crowd wants to hear, but I want to prove it to you, and I want to see a show of hands of who in this room speaks a language other than English. Okay, look at that. Put your hands down. Who in this room knows a person born in a foreign country? Almost everyone. Who in this room can see someone who looks different than them? All right, those questions are almost a joke in this room because everyone does. When those questions were asked when I was in school, 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 hands would go up. The school system you are in today was developed for the world I grew up in. It is gone. I'm a 63-year-old white man, and I'm increasingly going to be a dinosaur unless I am able to reach across cultural barriers and work with people different than I am. And it's true. It's true. So what we've got to do is we've got to reinvent it, and you know those answers better than we do. You are the most valuable generation we've ever raised, because you can't work at Target today, you can't work at Best Buy today, unless you understand the customers coming through your door look a lot more like you than they looked in the school I came from. And you can't work in this economy without going around the world where people speak different languages and other cultures. You know more about that than I do. But here's one thing I want to say. When we say you're the most valuable generation we've ever raised, it's also because you're the ones willing to turn over the rock, those tough things that we've let linger way too long. Racism, gender, really tough issues that my generation allowed to fester too long. You are willing to raise the questions. You are going to lead us in the future. But I want to finally say, I want to also make a commitment. People my age who really value your generation will often say, boy, this world's kind of messed up right now. Thank God we got this younger generation. Well, I agree with that, but if you had a house that was totally messed up, would you throw the keys to your kids and say, wow, I messed up this house, fix it, kid? No. And we can't do that with our schools. We're on the line too. My generation is on the line too. And the reason the Minneapolis Foundation is funding this is we want to take your ideas and bring them into action. So do the tough work today. Recognize this is a rare opportunity to really help us reinvent where it goes. And all I can commit to you is we're on the path with you. Thank you so much for being exactly who you are. Go do some great work. Thank you.
Relax. Camouflage. And don't forget your hashtag.